Welcome into episode 252 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, the Bruins righted the ship after I would say, if not their worst game of the year against Buffalo, right up there. They bounced back with a 5-3 win over the Arizona Coyotes, who prior to their contest had been rolling. It had been noted that they had defeated the 5 consecutive Stanley Cup champions, and how that was the first time in NHL history that had happened, which makes me laugh because I was thinking about this. How many opportunities did a team have to play 5 consecutive Stanley Cup champions back to back? Like maybe never. So it's almost like they kind of got that by default by doing it. But Bridget and Scott, how are you guys? How was your weekend? And let's jump into our opening shifts regarding the Bruins Coyotes.
I'm good. It was a good weekend. I always like afternoon games because it really kind of frees up the rest of the weekend. Had a belated Friendsgiving / just Christmas party on Sunday. So feeling great into the holiday spirit.
That is very belated, by the way. That is the most belated Friendsgiving. It's a Christmas party at this point.
Yeah, it kind of was. And we don't even do Thanksgiving stuff. So it's just like a holiday get together.
What, do you have a Halloween party next week?
Right. Yeah. 4th of July coming up, first week of February. Yeah.
You laugh, but my family throws parties where it's one day and we all pick a different holiday and we do a bar crawl, like an in-home bar crawl where each area is a different holiday. So
like it's like Halloween Town, like from The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah.
Just have different holiday stops.
4th of July, yeah.
I like that. Bridget, how was your weekend?
It was good. It's good. I was at Yale Friday, and now I'm not.
No holiday parties for you. No Friendsgivings for you.
No Easter celebrations. No, nothing.
Okay. All right. Well, let's jump into the opening shifts then. Scott, let's start with you.
Well, as you mentioned, it was a big bounce back win for the Bruins, and they did it while losing their number one center in terms of ice time at the end of the first period. Pavel Zacha left the game with an upper body injury and did not return. There was no further update after the game. Could get one Monday at practice. But, yeah, the Bruins have to play the rest of the game down, obviously a key player. And, I think we're going to get into how they went about replacing him, too, because it was pretty fascinating. It wasn't just a matter of, okay, well, the other 3 centers get more ice time. In fact, Matt Poitras was benched for the entire third period. Morgan Geekie moved over to center, got a lot of minutes. Trent Frederick even took some shifts at center. So it was a collective effort, but maybe not with the exact names you would have anticipated to replace Zacha.
Yeah, and mine is kind of similar because Zacha goes down in game, but McAvoy went down in the Buffalo game and didn't come back, and also didn't play Saturday. So he's out. Forbert's out on long-term IR, which we already mentioned last episode. But it came down to who was going to step up in the win and who maybe is going to have to step up the rest of the week, or we don't really know how long McAvoy is going to be out. But after the game, Montgomery said 27, 25, and 48 were our leaders on defense. That's Lindholm, Carlo, and Grzelcyk. So that's who we thought was stepping up. But also Scott and I both saw different statistics about Ian Mitchell probably having his best game of the season. Got his most ice time of the year, above 18 minutes. It's only the second time this season he's had above 18 minutes of time on ice. And I know, Scott, you had another advanced stat about it. But he was carrying his weight out there, where they gave fewer shifts to Laura and Shattenkirk's line. Those guys had the fewest minutes of time on ice, but Mitchell was the one stepping up and taking part of the load.
Yeah, and Brian, before you give your opening shift on Mitchell, not even from the realm of advanced stats, but he was on the ice for 4 of the Bruins' goals. He was out there for 4 of the 5. So Good. He was also on for 1 against, but still, you'll take a +3 any day.
And for me, I just continue to be impressed by Danton Heinen this year and his professionalism and his ability to impact this lineup in a positive manner. Scores another goal against the Coyotes, and it was a really nice goal. It was a goal scorer's goal, which not calling Danton Heinen necessarily a goal scorer. I'm saying it was a goal scorer's goal. But with 9 points in 18 games, he continues to score at a half a point per game pace. And I should have done the math before, but I don't know where that ranks on the Bruins forwards, but it's probably, I would say, maybe good for like 4th or 5th. I would imagine you have Pastrnak, Coyle, Zacha, and Marchand before him, and then it might be Heinen. I know he's in front of DeBrusk. He might be similar to Poitras. But look, it's a guy that comes in on a PTO, sits upstairs for the first couple of weeks of the season when the team's playing well, and yeah, just waits for his moment to even sign a contract. Probably could have signed elsewhere at some point, you would imagine, around the league. And he's just he comes in and he's a good player. He's just a solid player for this team, and I think he deserves some stick taps from the skate pod.
Yeah, he has the same amount of goals as Jake DeBrusk in 7 fewer games. So, I mean, he's been contributing.
Yeah, he's 7th on the team in points per game. And the only guys ahead of him, David Pastrnak, Brad Marchand, Charlie McAvoy, Charlie Coyle, Pavel Zacha, James Van Riemsdyk. He's right ahead of Heinen at 0.5, right ahead of Poitras 0.48, Frederick 0.46, DeBrusk 0.44. So, he's been huge. He's making league minimum, and he's producing like a legitimate middle 6 forward, which, I think we all know he's capable of being that, but he did have, his production took a bit of a dip last year in Pittsburgh after he had a career high in goals the year before. But yeah, he's really been a great fit and has provided some much needed offensive depth for this team.
So looking back at the Coyotes game, where do you two feel the Bruins excelled, where they faltered against Buffalo?
Well, I think start with the offense, which was just basically non-existent in that Buffalo game. They really struggled to mount any sort of sustained pressure. Lose 3-1 in a game that it never really felt like they were in, honestly. And then you come in against Arizona, against a goalie that's in Connor Ingram. That's been one of the best goalies in the NHL this season. Going into Saturday, he was 4th in the NHL in save percentage. Actually smack right in the middle between Swayman and Ullmark. And Bruins put up 5 goals, and they do it while having to shuffle lines for 40 minutes with Zacha out and mixing and matching. And, I think it's kind of it's a reminder that, sometimes how you're playing is more important than who you're playing with, because when the Bruins are playing like they played on Saturday with sustained forecheck and offensive zone cycles and getting pucks and bodies to the net, like the lines don't matter as much. Who's playing with who doesn't matter as much. It really comes back to like those core tenets. And, I think when Montgomery changes the lines up so much when guys are healthy, it's in part because they're just not playing the right way. And so you shake up the lines to try to shake up the team. The reality is, like, yeah, there might be combinations that in Montgomery's mind and our mind that are ideal that we want to see, that we think are going to be, the best fits going forward. And ultimately you do want to settle on something approaching, regular combinations. But the Bruins showed on Saturday, like, they can be a good offensive team even without having settled the lines if they play the way that they did on Saturday and not the way that they did on Thursday.
Yes, but I also just want to time out and say that it wasn't the prettiest win. I mean, they were dominating the first, and then all of a sudden, things went stagnant, and there was definitely a struggle in the middle part of the game to get things right. The Coyotes didn't just roll over. It wasn't just like a dominant Bruins win at all.
Yeah, and to be clear, like I'm not saying it was. I'm just specifically talking about the offense coming alive.
Yeah. And I think someone else that stepped up because of the fact that Zacha went down as early as he did, Zacha only had about 6.5 minutes of ice time before he left the game and didn't come back for the second period or the third period. And we mentioned Matt Poitras had a very low amount of time on ice. He only had just over 8 minutes of time on ice, which is actually kind of similar to Zacha's, even though Zacha was missing for 2 periods. Poitras was also missing for a period, even though he was there. He didn't find the ice at all in the third period. So there was somebody that had to step up with both of those centers not taking shifts in the third, and that was Morgan Geekie. Morgan Geekie was playing at one point as if it was like a makeshift perfection line in the middle of Marchand and Pasta. Like he found himself on shifts with David Pastrnak, and that's not something that he started out the game as your winger, fourth line winger. He ended up the game as your top line center. And I think he looked fine in that role. I mean, he was on the ice for the second Pastrnak goal. He threw the puck like a kind of a no look, like spin around pass to the front of the net. That was a really easy goal for Pastrnak. Just took it off the pads and put it in. So he muscled his way in on that play and helped the Bruins score.
Bridget, to your point about the Bruins not having a pretty victory, Scott, I'm only asking you this not because I'm lazy, but because I feel like you have just these magical subscriptions to these analytics sites. So maybe by the end of the podcast, we can find this answer. But I'm curious how many games this year the Bruins have been outshot. Because once again, last night, they were outshot by the Coyotes. Again, a team, say what you want about the Bruins, but I feel like over the years, they've always been a team to outshoot their opponents for the majority. Now you can have discussions about if those shots were high quality or just perimeter. And that's fair. But the Coyotes coming into Boston and outshooting the Bruins, it's just something that never really happens. The Bruins getting outshot on home ice. And I just feel like it's been a recurring theme, and it hasn't really ailed them too much in the win category. But it's just something I've noticed. Like teams territorially have been kind of, I feel like maybe having the edge on Boston in the majority of games this year, if not maybe a little over half. Did you have anything on that, Scott, or want me to keep going?
Well, I mean, just to highlight it, they've been outshot on the season. They're actually below 50% for the season. So, I don't have the exact number of games, but to your point, if they're slightly below 50, they're like 49.7%. But yeah, I think it's safe to say it's probably around half their games, maybe even slightly more, that they've been outshot.
Okay, so that checks out. So to the whole Poitras thing, I understand what Montgomery's doing. He wants to go with the guys he has confidence in to close out a game, but I find this a little bit problematic long term, because I just think that if you can't play Poitras a regular shift in the third period when you're already down a center, what are we doing here? Because you can play this game now in December, but you're going to have to trust this kid in these moments in the stretch run and into the playoffs. Like you can't just not have somebody be part of the game plan. Like, and especially when Zacha goes down all game, you're going to run 2 centers, but because you have the luxury of flexibility, maybe some guy plays wing and then center for a shift or 2 just to give somebody a break. But I find that problematic. You go down a center and somebody who's supposed to be one of your top 3 centers just doesn't get ice time in the third period. I don't know if I agree with that, guys.
I think that, so I understand it. At the same time, I do think in this specific game, it's concerning in this specific game with Zacha being out. Like we saw him do it previously. Was it the Montreal game where he didn't get a lot of shifts in the third? This time he gets 0 shifts in the third, which I find to be, if you don't trust him at all to take 1 shift, say after like a special teams, like, or just in general, you don't trust him to win the puck. Like obviously we know he's a younger kid, and he still has that part of his game to work on more than anything else. But without your number 1 center in there already, you need guys to pull on the rope, and you would have thought that he would have leaned on Poitras more rather than not at all. So to me, I understand, like, Montgomery was kind of approaching it like, okay, I'm not going to put anyone out there that I wouldn't want killing penalties. Like, you basically like trying to play a very defensive style third. And Poitras, that's not his strength in his game. So in that way, I get it. But you didn't really, then you're stuck with three centers, and one of your centers is actually a winger that like started out the game at wing. So that's what's the concerning part to me, is they really don't trust him that much. And does that psychologically affect a player?
I would say it would be concerning if it's still happening in, say, the second half of the season. I don't mind it now, because I think Matt Poitras does have a lot to learn, and that's not any sort of criticism. That's just the reality of a 19-year-old making the jump from the OHL to the NHL and playing a completely new defensive system. He played man-to-man in juniors, and really played more of kind of just an up and down run and gun style. And now he's being asked to play zone defense on a contending team that is very demanding of its centers in terms of their 200-foot game. And Montgomery has said that, and he's said like it's not an easy system to play center in. He's said, like, yes, you have to allow Poitras and Beecher, for that matter, some leash to make mistakes. But when the game's on the line, Montgomery said it after the game when he was asked about it. He said, I'm going to go with the guys that I think are going to get us the win. And we've seen quite a bit that he has shortened the bench in third periods this year. I think because he senses that the Bruins this season, more than last season, might need those points. We talked about it on a recent episode. Like, you don't want to slip into that whole cluster, from, call it like 2 to 5 in the division, or 4 through 10 or 11 in the conference. Like, you don't want to be in that group. So you want to try to stay ahead of it. So in a game on December 9th, I don't mind Montgomery still saying, okay, hey, Matt, there's things you have to learn. Watch on the bench, watch on video. We're going to keep going over it. We're going to keep practicing it. And eventually you're going to get put in those situations and be expected to perform. So I'm not to the point of concern yet. Like I said, I would be if 2 months from now we're having the same conversation.
So yeah. I hear you there, Scott, and it's a good point, but I would say it's not that you're assuming that they're putting extra value on these points early in the season to gain that cushion, so that they can look back in the spring and be like, all right, we got this cushion in the standings. We can allow Matt to learn now, right? But we're assuming that
I don't really think that's it, though.
Okay.
I think he's learning now, has been learning, and will continue to learn. And the idea is that by the second half of the season, he doesn't have to learn on the fly and play through mistakes. He knows what he has to do, and he doesn't make those mistakes.
Okay, so he's going to have to do a lot of that on ice learning in the first and second period until then. And then,
yeah, well, and by the way, like we saw yesterday, he has a costly turnover that leads to a goal that was, not a good play. Like he had Shattenkirk open going up the, as the weak side defenseman through the neutral zone, and he hung onto the puck too long and turned it over. So
it's true. Yep, it's true. He also is the reason that Danton Heinen scored his goal, because he outworked his opponent and led to that goal. So the reason that, and I'll be honest, that's a play that he makes that's very simple and it's not sexy, but I'm telling you right now, not everybody on the Bruins does that. So I just think, like, I don't know, if I'm him, you're very much a part of the game. You're impacting the game, as you illustrated, Scott, also with a giveaway. But you also, your work ethic leads to that goal, right? So you're sitting on the bench saying to yourself, man, if it wasn't for me on that play, like, Heinen doesn't go in and score, it's not 4-2, which, by the way, was a big moment because Arizona had stormed back a little bit there. And now you're just sitting there, not one shift in the third, not one shift. And I just think, like, I don't know, you can shelter him and make him learn, but 0 shifts, I mean, what is this game? Is this game 7 of the Cup Finals? Like, come on. So I just found it a little bit harsh, like not a shift when he was impacting the game before that and was part of the game. And I don't know. I see it. I understand it. All I'm saying is I don't agree with it to the extent that Montgomery has been benched in these periods, because you have to feel like you're a part of the team out there in all periods. So that's my opinion on it. I agree. It's not like the end of the world right now. I don't love to see it with a young kid who is good enough to be in the lineup, good enough to be on the roster, good enough to impact the team in a positive way and negatively, but everybody does. And then in the third period, you're just like, okay, what room is want me to fill the water bottles in again? Because I see Pasta's thirsty over there. It's like it sends a weird message, I think. But that's just me. It's very high school hockey-esque, kind of.
I was gonna say, it reminded me of like my worst basketball games where I was like benched and I was pissed off about it. So like, I don't know, like that's why I wonder, like we all have mentioned this before. Seems like a kid that can handle it, that kind of whatever, like that mental struggle of being like, okay, what the hell? Because he sat the game before too. He's back in the lineup after a healthy scratch, which we were told was load management. Which I still believe it is, but when you put this right after that, it kind of makes you think, okay, was it really? But yeah, just kind of publicly looks a little bit worse than maybe what they've intended. So that's part of it. And when coach was asked after the game by Andy Brickley about benching Poitras in the third, he said, or I think he just said load management in the third in general. He said the reason why we shortened the bench was because we don't have a game till Wednesday. So he thought that he wasn't worried about guys getting spent because they were going to have time to rest. I don't know what you guys think of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is probably a factor too. Like if they were playing again on Sunday or maybe even Monday, maybe you don't load up guys with as many minutes. I mean, we mentioned Geeky. He played the second most minutes he's played this season. Trent Frederick played the second most minutes he's played. Charlie Coyle played a season high in minutes. So, yeah, they clearly leaned on the guys that Montgomery trusted. I will take this opportunity to plug that on Monday morning, possibly by the time this podcast is up and people listen to it, I have a feature on weei.com on Matt Poitras and Johnny Beecher. And we cover some of this stuff about, some of the tougher ups and downs of their rookie season. I think there's also some pretty fun stuff in there about them living together. They have an apartment together in the North End. So people should check that out. But yeah, I guess, one thing I would maybe question Montgomery on a little bit is when you do this, because you're so focused on the defensive side of it, it does feel a bit conservative to me. And I do think at times that's bit the Bruins when they've been trying to protect leads, is sometimes it feels like they do sit back too much and don't push for that next goal to put the game out of reach. And I do think, as we saw with Poitras bounces, the turnover that led to the goal against came first. The bounce back to help create the Heinen goal comes after that. And I do think like he can help you extend a lead. Like he has that offensive creativity. So that to me would be like the one criticism is like, you're benching him because you don't fully trust him to do the right things to protect the lead yet. But are you maybe swinging a little too conservative where you're at the same time benching, a guy who's fifth on the team in 5-on-5 points per 60 minutes, like one of their top 5-on-5 scorers. So, that's definitely like a fair flip argument.
But, and also, Pasternak extended the lead to 5-3 with, what was it, like 6 minutes to go or something like that, 6-7 minutes to go. So you mean to tell me with a 2-goal cushion against Arizona at home, like you can't throw them out there for a shift or two, like with a 2-goal lead in December? It's conservative is the word, Scott. It's just, it's a little much. It's a little much, especially when they go up 5-3. It's a little much. I don't know.
And Also consider this when coach was asked what the message was to the guys that weren't getting shifts in the third, he said, we haven't talked about it yet. Like, it wasn't something they went over in the intermission. It wasn't something they went over on the bench. He said that I'll get the message out Monday. And so as of us recording right now, maybe we're not sure how much explanation was given to Poitras and maybe some of the other guys who had their ice time cut down in the third period.
And I'm not, look, believe me, I'm not playing the world's smallest violin for Matt Poitras. He's a 19-year-old kid who's living the dream of playing in the NHL for an Original Six franchise and is a contributor. I mean, he's probably having the time of his life, and I don't think this is really bothering him. I mean, any day in the NHL is a great day for these players, but I don't like he makes the team out of camp. He's a contributor to this team. Yes, he has a lot to learn, but I just don't like the whole you guys are the ones that decided to keep him around. So keep him around. And I just think that by benching him in third periods when games are close, it's like when you're 17-5 and whatever, just let him learn on the ice as well as on the bench. And I'm not saying to play him a regular shift in the third period, but you can't just completely bench the kid. It doesn't sit right with me, especially when he's sitting there saying, well, so I can't help protect the lead that I help create. It's weird.
Especially it's weird. You see it more often when somebody has a specific mistake and then they're it's a consequence of a specific message that the coach is trying to send. And in this, it's it almost feels like it's because we've talked to coach when Poitras was out for the whole game, he was healthy scratched. And he said it wasn't it had nothing to do with how he's been playing. It wasn't a rookie wall. He said he still thinks he's playing well, but it just there's conflicting optics and messaging with it. And it's not, I feel like it's not common, but also it's very uncommon for there to be a 19-year-old playing. We don't see very many of those. So I guess you do have to take into consideration the situation is different. And I feel we all are we're all on top of this because he kind of feels like just a little brother. He's got that energy of the kid that you're just supposed to be no, that's my little brother. Don't be mean to him.
Well, and not just a 19-year-old rookie center, which is tough enough on its own, but on one of the best teams in the NHL. This isn't Columbus or Anaheim where they can just let kids play through mistakes and, okay, well, you might have cost us this game here and there, but hey, we're not really going for the cup this year anyways, so, we can keep throwing you out there and give you 17 minutes a night. This is different. This is a team that's trying to win every game and trying to ultimately win the Stanley Cup. That is their goal. So the demands and the expectations are just higher. They are. And Poitras and Beecher could be in less demanding situations where they don't get healthy scratched or benched in the third period. But I'm sure they would tell you that they love being on a team this good to start their NHL careers. So, I think they get it. Like I said, I'm not at a point of being concerned yet. I would be if it continues, a lot longer than this. The last thing for me on Poitras is just because this is also new since the last time we recorded, but Montgomery said on Friday that there will be more scheduled nights off for Poitras worked in going forward, that this is sort of a bigger load management plan and that wasn't just one Thursday night in December. He didn't say exactly how often, and he did say there's some flexibility to change it, especially depending on injuries and things like that. So, he also said it is partly inspired by what Anaheim's doing with Leo Carlson, which early returns seem to be pretty positive. I don't think he's not going to sit that often. Carlson has been healthy scratched, and I think it's 8 out of 25 games. So it won't be that, but I think the idea is similar. And one other thing that I think, especially people I saw on Twitter, get the wrong idea of he needed a day off after they just had 3 straight days off. And it's like that night off from the game isn't a day off. Like he was doing extra work in the gym that day on the ice before morning skates. So it's not it's not a rest day. It's just a different kind of work. Yeah. And by the way, so for the story dropping on Monday, I talked to Poitras on Thursday, Thursday morning, which was the day he got healthy scratched. And we didn't know he was going to be a healthy scratch until pregame warmups. And he gave no indication of it. He was in a great mood that day. He was laughing, joking around. So if he was feeling really down about it and pissed off, he did an extremely good job hiding it.
Yeah, I don't think he was.
Sorry, Bridget, go ahead.
I was going to say, we don't want to spend the whole episode talking about this, but there's 2 specific things that directions we can go off of it. I want to talk about Lohrei and kind of what's been going on with him since he got called up, but also the thing that we're, part of the center conversation is Zacha going down and us not knowing when he'll be back or exactly what the injury is. Cause Scott, you said you went back and looked at the last 2 shifts he took and we, none of us saw a specific play where we were like, oh, it's a shoulder. We don't know what it is exactly. But there might be a need to call up a center. Maybe we can talk about solutions at center. It seems like Geeky is a prime candidate to move from wing to his natural center. So, and when he was brought in, I think they expected him to be the 4th line center and then Beecher won the job. So, just want to talk about.
They expected him to be the 3rd line center. It was possible to beat him out for the job.
Yeah, it's true. So he is a capable center. So that's a great option. But at some point, maybe do we see Georgi Merkulov come up?
He would be the call up if they decide to call up a center, but I don't know that it necessarily has to be a center because, as we said, Geeky can just shift to center, and then your 4 centers could be Coyle in whatever order you want to put them in: Coyle, Geeky, Poitras, Beecher, and Jacob Lagu goes back into the lineup. There's your 12 forwards. And so it could just be, a Patrick Brown comes up to be the 13th forward. They don't necessarily need to call up someone who's going to come play in games.
No, but I bring it up because I saw Mark Diver, who is, he covers the P Bruins a lot. He mentioned that Georgi Merkulov has been on kind of a tear recently. I'm trying to pull up the stats. He's been improving the whole season. And he said, especially his play away from the puck, looks a lot better than he did last season. So I think the numbers were.
Yeah. Well, I think he just had a 5-point game on Saturday, I believe. So yeah, he's lighting it up. I think he's 21 points in 24 games.
So he has 99 career regular season games with Providence, and he's got 81 points, which is 0.81 points per game. That's a pretty good sample size. What's a kid like that have to do to eventually get a look in the NHL? And I know we're talking about potential replacement here for Zacha being injured, so I know injury is an opportunity potentially, but 100 games is 100 games in the minors, and I think he's probably 23 or something like that because he was an NCAA player. So
but he left college early.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you guys think he's done enough at the AHL level in the regular season?
He is 23 though.
He's 23.
Yeah, he was a late NCAA player.
So do you guys think he's done enough at the AHL level to earn an opportunity? It's just a matter of that opportunity presenting itself to him.
I think he's getting really close because the big question with him was always his defensive play. He was very raw before Ohio State and still very raw when the Bruins signed him. And that was always going to be the area where he needed to improve the most. And I think from talking to him and from talking to Ryan Mougenel during development camps, he has definitely made progress. And I think that's what Mark Divver highlighted in the tweet that Bridget mentioned is
I have it.
His play away from the puck is really where he's made the biggest improvements, and has been able to continue to score along with it. So he's getting there. Unfortunately for him, he obviously didn't have. Well, I shouldn't say that. He had a good training camp in preseason, but not the best. He certainly didn't stand out like Poitras and Beecher did. And there's, for a team that wants to contend, like there's only so many rookie centers you can throw in there. And I think they are all better suited to be centers than wings. So we're talking about like what Poitras and Beecher as rookie centers have to learn. And, if you throw a third one in there, like Jim Montgomery, you can't bench like 2 or 3 centers at once. So I do think their preference would probably be to just shift Morgan Geekie to center, but Merkulov is definitely making progress for sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. I think it makes sense for them to just put like plug Lauko in, move Geekie over. Really easy, simple, nothing crazy. But the tweet I saw from Mark Divver, friend of the podcast, he said 7 straight wins for the Providence Bruins. Georgi Merkulov was +5, 2 goals, 3 assists for 5 points. He leads the team in scoring with 8 goals, 13 assists, and 21 points in 24 games. And then his analysis was he's been really good away from the puck, which was not his strength a year ago. If Boston needs a center, he'd be my choice, is what Mark Dever said about Merkulov recently.
While we're talking about Providence, and I know this is kind of off on a tangent here, but Mark McLaughlin, Scott's cousin, as we've discussed in previous episodes, I should say, clarify, not actually his cousin for those listening. He seems like a player, and again, I'm guilty for not watching Providence hockey. It's just not readily available. But, he's got 5 points in 24 games this year. Is he a player that maybe was sent down to the AHL to polish his game and maybe has kind of regressed for one reason or another, just is maybe a lack of confidence at not being at the NHL level, or maybe just, the game catching up to him a bit? What are you guys saying about him and just the Bruins center ice depth beyond the main club?
Yeah, I mean, McLaughlin has to produce more, and it's a little ironic because if you go back to last season, when we all thought like he was very close to making the Bruins out of camp and ended up getting sent down, the explanation was like, well, we know what he can do offensively. We've seen his shot. We've seen that he can like get open around the net, and he needs to improve his all around game. And I think he's done that, and I think he's worked at that. But maybe in the process, some of the offense has dried up, and so he's got to find that balance and find a way to get kind of everything going. Because to your point, whatever it is, 5 points in 24 games or whatever, like that's not going to get you a look. Like even on a 4th line role, there's other guys who are going to be ahead of you in the pecking order with that kind of production.
Okay, so moving along to Bridget's opening shift, which was the defense stepping up with McAvoy and Forbort out of the lineup. I'm not going to speak too much on it because it was your opening shift, Bridget, so I'll throw it back over to you.
Yeah, so the 2 call-ups, first was Lori when Forbort went out, and then for the Arizona game, Ian Mitchell gets the call-up to the active roster in Boston, and he has been, he's an NHL player. He's a guy that's kind of on the fringe of this roster because it's such a good roster. But we've seen his flashes of offense, and one of those statistics that Scott was mentioning was just like heavily weighted in how good his offense was against Arizona. So we saw him really step up, and then you go to not just the call-ups because those 2 guys are obviously stepping in as the bodies that come in and replace them, but guys taking up more ice time and having to put in more effort. And the obvious guys are Brendan Carlo and Hampus Lindholm. Matt Grzelcyk also asked to step up in that situation. And so I also thought it was interesting because when you lose McAvoy, you also lose your top your quarterback on your top power play unit. And Kevin Shattenkirk steps in and he ends up with a power play goal. So there was all around, a good effort from the defense. You saw different flashes of things you liked. I don't know if you guys agree or not with how they played defensively and who stepped up.
Yeah, I think overall they were a little too leaky. Like they still gave up too many good chances. And Arizona, I think, fairly easily could have had more than 3 goals. I think Linus Ullmark was really good. Playing a second consecutive game for the first time this season, by the way. Swayman is back from his illness, but they just played it safe and went with Ullmark again. But yeah, overall though, I think like that was, about as good as you can reasonably expect from some of those guys stepping up. I did think it was Ian Mitchell's probably his best game of the season, not just because he was on the ice for 4 of the Bruins goals, but I thought he was just making really simple, good plays with the puck all game. I thought he was moving it quickly, was involved in transition a few times, helped keep offensive zone cycles going. So that's exactly what you want to see from him. Like that part of his game is more of a strength than his defense. You mentioned the Shattenkirk goal. I think both times they've been without McAvoy, going back to when he was suspended as well. I think Shattenkirk's done a pretty good job stepping up and handling, more of like a true. Well, I guess yesterday he was still like bottom pairing minutes, but stepping into more of a role, into a bigger role when he has to. So yeah, they did what they had to. I thought Lorai's first game back up against Buffalo, I thought was, a little bit of what we saw before. Like I did think he was still kind of getting caught defensively at times and on the ice for some quality chances against. I thought he was better Saturday. I still wouldn't say great, but I think a step in the right direction in his second game up of this stint in Boston.
Yeah, and I think that also the biggest place you notice the absence of McAvoy and Forbort is on the penalty kill. Not necessarily the power play, because they have a few guys that could step up and be that quarterback, so to speak, on the top power play unit. Shattenkirk, Lindholm, Grzelcyk, they can all do that. So you notice it more 5-on-5 and on the penalty kill. But we've talked about the attributes that Mitchell brings. He's more offensive minded than a Forbort, but not as, nobody's replacing McAvoy. So you just have to get what you can get from those guys and hope they don't make some big mistakes. Back to Shattenkirk for a second, he actually had the fewest minutes of any of the defensemen in the game. He got some important power play minutes, like we mentioned, but he wasn't a guy that Montgomery mentioned after the game as like, okay, that's who our leader is on defense. Like I said, he mentioned Lindholm, Carlo, and Grzelcyk. He did not mention Shattenkirk. And he hasn't talked too much about Lorai since the call-up, because when we asked him about Lorai the first game back, someone said, what'd you think of him? And he said, I didn't think anyone was good today. He was just negative about anyone. He wasn't really specific about Mason Lorai. So I think Ian Mitchell's trying to make the case of next time, someone comes back from injury, don't send me down, send the kid down, like trying to make sure that he's the next guy up, not Lorai, because he doesn't want to find himself in that point of the depth chart.
Yeah, I don't think they will. I mean, I think Mitchell's kind of carved out like at least that 7th defenseman spot for himself. If not, getting in over Shattenkirk at times, which we saw, around Thanksgiving. Like, Mitchell played over him in back-to-back games. So there's clearly at least like some competition there. And while guys are injured, like he's definitely going to be in there.
See, I like Shattenkirk, and not just because he's a former Terrier, Scott, but I just think like that Saturday night game in Toronto, he also scored that game, but he coughed the puck up at the blue line and Toronto went the other way and scored, but the puck exploded on his stick. It wasn't like a clean pass that went right to Toronto. Like, you know what I mean? It was kind of You know, it was an accident, unintentional puck explosion. But besides that, I just feel like obviously speed's not his game. I just feel like he's a calming presence. Like he knows what he's doing. He knows the right plays to make. He knows the reads to make. He knows where to be. I just think that I like him on that third pair as a guy that can just kind of, you know, weather the storm when it happens. And he just knows what he's doing. He's been around the game a long time. He's been a winner at every level. And I like his presence back there. But yeah, same sentiment you guys all said. The D did what they had to do with McAvoy out. And in addition to Ullmark bailing out them in front of him. So there were a couple. Well, I don't know if you guys wanted to skip ahead to some league news that happened this past week if we were done Bruins specific talk.
Yeah, just one last thing. We haven't had a chance to talk about him, but Pastrnak almost had a hat trick a few times. So he had that one shot that went off 2 posts and out, and he had 2 goals, and he almost had an empty net like to shoot at, but he just made the wrong choice and could have shot a second earlier. Probably would have had a hat trick. So it was close. Not to focus on some of the stuff that was more controversial. Like Pastrnak had another great game, and he has 16 goals now on the season. He's killing it. He's on a really good pace, I believe, higher pace than last season at this point.
I mean,
yeah, it is amazing, like how, and we're guilty of it, and I think a lot of people are, like how easy it is to just not talk about like how great he is consistently, game in, game out, because it's just like we go through all this stuff that's obviously because it's a little more controversial, like it's just easier to talk about. But yeah, it's like the guy had fucking 2 goals and an assist, like another 3-point game, and was incredible, and clearly the number one star and why you won. So
I think it was I think Nesson displayed it was, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe one of you guys or some of the listeners can correct me in the comment section, but I think it was like his 184th career like multi-point game or something like that. And yeah, it's impressive that he is where he is in the league scoring, which we expect him to be a top 5 scorer in the league, but he's up there so far, and he hasn't even had, to your point, Bridget, he hasn't even had a hat trick yet, and he's, Pastrnak is he's good for what feels like 2 hat tricks a season at some point, and at least a couple 4 or 5 point games like that really just like skyrockets him. He hasn't really had those yet. He's had a bunch of 2-point games and a couple 3 maybe. But yeah, he's just been an absolute offensive rock for them.
This is one of my favorite stats that I've been occasionally checking in on this season, but we're now like 2 full months into the season, and Pastrnak still has as many 3-point games, 7, as he does 0-point games, also 7. Like it's just crazy.
Yeah, he's a player, all right. He doesn't need much in this league to impact the game. So in Detroit, in Detroit, guys, there was an incident with the Ottawa Senators, Matthew Joseph and Dylan Larkin, along with David Perron, and was it Martin Zub? It was a controversial play. Definitely some suspensions coming out of it. And then in Columbus, there was an incident with Nick Cousins and the Panthers with Eric Gabranson. Hit Gabranson from behind, turtled, and then Gabranson kind of got his revenge later on. What do you guys make of all this animosity going on in the league? Isn't it? Are these guys supposed to be friends off the ice? What's going on here?
Yeah, I mean the one in Detroit is kind of crazy because like I mean Dylan Larkin was like out cold on the ice, and it didn't look initially like the hardest hit to the head. It there's like a little bit of a rabbit punch, a little bit of a cross check. Clearly like a penalty, and then he does go down awkwardly, and he sort of has his head like jammed into the ice, which is probably the worst part of it. Is like you didn't just give the guy like a rabbit punch, you kind of rode him down into the ice. And then Perron responds with a cross check to the head to the wrong guy, which is like I don't know if he didn't see what happened or what. Like you see that from time to time where like someone goes after the wrong guy because they didn't fully see it, but they know they want to stick up for their teammate. But like even still, you can't even if you have the right guy, like you can't cross-check him in the head. So I know Perron has an in-person hearing with the Department of Player Safety on Monday, which means it can and almost certainly will be more than a 5-game suspension. And then for the Nick Cousins hit, like I've thought for several years now that the NHL doesn't crack down enough on hits from behind. And I'm going to be really fascinated to see what happens with this one, because in my mind, that should be a suspendable hit. And yet there's been a lot of those hits in recent years that don't get a suspension or even really any supplemental discipline. So I'd definitely be interested to see if anything happens there. That had happened on Sunday, so I guess we'll also find out Monday.
Yeah. So I saw I didn't see the Larkin thing live. I saw it this morning, Sunday morning. Just kind of came across my feed, and I had to watch it, and I don't like watching these kind of things, like, not even the first time, but I had to watch it a few times to figure out exactly what happened. And like, he kind of got hit from both sides at the same time as well. And he was knocked out. Like, he was on the ice. He wasn't moving. Guys were like stepping over top of him, which seems like there should be some sort of rule in place when like someone is motionless, like get the hell away from them and don't like fight over top of them. They had like emotions running high and they weren't even looking on the ice. And like, I forget who it was. Someone on the opposite team was waving over the trainer right away, and other people were completely oblivious to the fact that he was, knocked out. And it just feels like people should have there should maybe be a rule that makes people pay more attention to stuff like that. But it was scary for a second. He ended up getting up. Like, the worst fear is like it was like a neck injury and like paralyzed, but that's not what happened. He gets up like on his own stands, but has to get helped into the locker room, like kind of dragged and with his head down. He did not look good. And then I saw this morning he was getting scans, and they came back, they didn't show anything. But I'm wondering what the scans were for. Like, I don't know exactly what that would be.
Well, hopefully he's okay. It looked pretty bad on the ice. And again, like Scott said, it wasn't too obvious because the initial contact didn't look too crazy, but obviously hope Larkin's okay. Goodbranson's okay. He got up to pound Cousins.
I watched that whole game today because I literally sat on my couch the whole day, and didn't do anything except for watch football, hockey, and PC Friars basketball. But so that game was insane with Columbus. The reason why Goodbranson was so like upset was, first of all, Cousins should have gotten 5 in the first place. And he told the refs, if you don't give him 5, as soon as I step out of the box and he steps out of the box, I'm going to kick his ass. And he did. So he's like, I'm straight up telling you what I'm going to do. And that kind of brings us back around to something you kind of said, Scott, which was, if you just get it right, if you get the 5 minutes and, the guy gets a game misconduct, doesn't come back, and you don't see the retaliation from Goodbranson, who then he gets ejected, for the fight, just like coming out of the box. And actually, I think maybe it was a shift later, tackled him down to the ice, and it led to all sorts of craziness. And then on Twitter, people are like, "Oh, Goodbranson should be kicked out of the league," and it's like, I understand exactly why he did what he did. Not saying he shouldn't have gotten the game misconduct, but
I mean,
he was policing himself because he thought that the refs didn't do enough.
Cousins could have ended his career if shit went bad there, right? So
yeah, he said that's a hit that paralyzes people.
Yeah.
So
well,
I know why he was as mad as he was.
Yeah, and like one of my biggest problems on this, and I think this is like, it almost seems like the NHL uses to justify like not suspending guys for it, is like you see Goodbranson do the check over the shoulder to like see if there's someone coming, but it's like, just because someone's coming doesn't mean you can like get your, like, sometimes in order to play the puck and make the play, you still have to have your back to them. Like, sometimes there's just no avoiding having your back turned just because of the angle you're going in at. And it still has to be on the guy delivering the hit to not drill someone in the numbers 2 feet from the boards. Like that. So like, that's what gets me, is like, and this kind of goes, like, I don't know if you guys saw like John Tortorella's rant a couple of weeks ago, but it was after the,
Hathaway Hughes.
Yeah, exactly. And he was like, guys have to be guys aren't learning how to prepare themselves to be hit. And there's some truth to that, but like there's still situations where you're going to be in a vulnerable spot, and like it has to be on the guy delivering the hit to not deliver one that's that dangerous, even if the guy sees you coming. Like that's not a green light to run someone through the numbers.
Kind of sounds like victim blaming to me.
Yeah.
It's on that guy to not get.
Yeah, and the Hughes one too is I don't know if you guys mentioned this too, but that was the ref like not
Totally
blowing the whistle. Like that's like he's putting that player in harm, because the rules today, if the defenseman beats the guy to the dots, you blow the whistle right away for icing. And the ref literally just went, old school and just didn't blow the whistle at all. And it's like, well, buddy, you can't just revert back to, hockey rules circa pre-04 lockout, because players have now been playing for 20 years with this new rule in place, right? So it's like, what are you doing? But you see David Perron stick up for Dylan Larkin with again, Scott, you mentioned it, cross checks the wrong player in the face. Very, very dangerous play. Perron's a little weasel. We know that from the St. Louis days. With the stuff with Krug and just in general, we know Nick Cousins is a little weasel down in Florida. So these are two teams, Detroit and Florida, that probably stand in the Bruins' way this postseason. And so, if you're a Bruins player and a Bruins fan, obviously, probably get ready for some nasty with these two teams, because they're not afraid to. I know Larkin was on the receiving end of something with Ottawa, but in general, Detroit plays with a little edge, and we know Florida certainly does. So, two teams that I think will probably be in the Bruins' way this year. We're talking about right now on this podcast. Any closing thoughts from the two of you?
No, I think I'm good.
No, I think we're good. You gotta go get out of here and pick your girlfriend up from South Station if you're gonna be late.
Yeah, well, we keep the personal stuff off the podcast.
Not Bridget.
Just throw me under the bus. Hey, I gave us an hour. It's 10 o'clock at night, So there's only so many hours in a day to do stuff. But anyway, yes. So everybody have a wonderful work week, and we will talk to you very soon. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.